the two positions that we have our pelvis in Pilates, and that is the neutral position and imprint position. So neutral, you come down to the mat, you bring knees hip distance apart, feet hip distance apart, and they're in line with our sits bones. So from there, what you're going to do is just take your hands, the heel of your hands on your hip bones, and let your fingers drop in towards your pubic bone. And you're going to rock those points just back and forth a few times, letting the lower back connect into the floor, and then kind of rolling it away. And then what you're going to do is settle into and try to find your neutral. So your neutral is when those 3 points are in the same plane, so they're parallel. If you had a cup of water and you placed it kind of in the middle of that triangle, it wouldn't tip one way or the other. So everyone's spine is shaped differently, and some will have a really big space between their lower back and the mat. Some people won't really have much at all. So you're not going to go so much by the space between your lower back and the mat, but more about lining those 3 points up. So hip bones and pubic bone in the same plane. If it's really uncomfortable, oftentimes if you're tight through the lower back, you're going to feel like you're in a little bit of an arch position. If it's very uncomfortable, you can roll the pelvis back slightly until you get rid of that. It's okay if you feel a little bit of a stretch, but it shouldn't be really uncomfortable to settle into neutral. So when we are in neutral and we flex up in Pilates, what we want is to keep the pelvis stable. So we want to avoid having that lower back come into the floor. So when we're curling up, we don't roll the pelvis backwards. We keep it stable, and as we come back down, stays the same. The other position is imprint. So anytime we have our legs up in the air, we want our lower back into the floor because that's more supportive to the spine when the legs are up, because our legs are heavy. If we maintain that neutral when we come up, it sometimes is too difficult and we go into an arch, and that's when you can hurt the lower back. So when knees are in the air, you want lower back into the floor. So we call that imprint. So what you're going to do is just a few times go back into your imprint and then roll back into neutral. And keep your hands there so you can feel as you go back to imprint, your hip bones will drop towards the floor and your pubic bone will lift. And as you go back to neutral, they'll kind of settle back out to parallel in the same plane. So back into imprint and into neutral. Now let's try just going back into imprint. So lower back is into the floor, and you're going to bring your knees up. So you can feel like when the knees come up, you kind of want to have your lower back into the floor because again, it's more supportive. What we want is to try to keep the belly pulled into the floor so that it kind of supports, almost compresses the abdominals and supports the lower back when the legs are in the air. So that's really important too. When you're doing abdominal exercises, you shouldn't feel it in your lower back. If you do, that's when you need to modify or make adjustments. So again, back to neutral, hip bones, pubic bone in the same plane. This is a really, this is kind of the position that our spine would be in if we had that perfect posture and we didn't have any tight muscles anywhere in our body, or if we stood in perfect posture all day long. We want to try to strengthen our spine in neutral because it's the most shock absorbing position for our spine, kind of the safest position for our spine to be in. The healthiest kind of optimal spinal position is neutral. So that's why when we go into flexion, we want to try to keep that neutral pelvis, strengthening those abdominals in neutral. So last thing to think about when you're in this neutral position, our transversus is our deepest abdominal muscle, and it's like a corset that wraps all the way around your middle. So to engage that muscle, all you have to do is kind of draw your belly button in, or you can even put your fingers kind of in by your hip bones and cough or laugh, whatever's easier, and you'll feel that muscle engage as you cough. So that's our most important abdominal muscle because that's what keeps us standing straight, that supports our spine, and you can engage that by just kind of drawing your tummy in just a little bit. So when we're doing those abdominal exercises in Pilates, we always want to try to draw our belly in. And again, why we want to stay neutral when we flex up in those exercises is because then we're going to work from the inside out, starting with that transversus. And we have 4 layers of abdominal, so we're going to work each one of those if we stay neutral. If you lose neutral and you do your ab crunches all day, sometimes you'll notice when you do those exercises, your belly almost protrudes a little bit, and that's often because we're just targeting that rectus abdominis, which is the kind of that six-pack muscle that you have through here. If you have that ab burn from doing crunches all day, you know you're going to strengthen that muscle, but you may not be strengthening your transversus. So that's why we really want to keep the pelvis stable when we go into that flexion, or when we're in imprint, really draw the belly in, so we make sure that we get each one of those layers of abdominals strong versus just those outer layers. So it's transversus, our internal and external obliques, and then our rectus abdominis is in the front. So we want to start from the inside layer and work our way out. Thank you.